How's it going, everybody? I'm Brian for Pop Culture Crossing, and today we are talking about Batman the Telltale Series. As the title indicates, this is Telltale's adaptation of the DC Comics superhero, The Dark Knight. Set in an episodic framework, this game allows players to make key choices that will impact certain story beats. In addition to this agency, the game features comic book art-styled visuals and not only focuses on Batman, but lets characters portray Bruce Wayne. The game was released in 2016 and is available on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, Xbox One, Xbox 360, PC, and mobile devices. This review does not examine each episode specifically, but assesses the entire first season as a whole. The game's story is unique in several aspects. The choice-based approach and ability to make choices as Bruce Wayne and Batman result in an interesting take on the character and his lore. As such, the story features two plot points, one focusing on Wayne and Batman respectively, that really weave together nicely to create a larger narrative. Crime-related problems test Batman when a new sinister organization called the Children of Arkham and its maniacal leader is revealed. Simultaneously, Bruce Wayne faces challenges on multiple fronts. First, negative revelations regarding his family and their legacy are publicized. And this really shapes public opinion of not only the Wayne legacy as a whole, but of Bruce himself. And Wayne must attempt to manage these things all while trying to maintain control of Wayne Enterprises. Additionally, Bruce is serving as the primary financier for Harvey Dent's mayoral campaign. All of these elements just add layers of complexity and is really something that should be appreciated. Players should be made aware that the story in Batman the Telltale series deviates significantly from the traditional Batman continuity. So those who are not privy to this and are expecting a story that pretty much aligns to how you would traditionally think of Batman and his mythos, you'll likely be shocked and possibly upset by the story changes here. It's really best to treat this game as an Elseworlds one-shot or a mini-series or like an alternate universe type of story. One that's really separate from the main Batman canon or how you would traditionally think of Batman and his characters and his background. Despite this shift, similarities to Batman the Animated Series, Batman the Mask of the Phantasm, and Batman Begins can be seen throughout the experience. I generally prefer the conventional Batman continuity, but Telltale's story here seems pretty unique. However, mature elements in the game preclude it from being accessible to a wider cross-section of gamers, meaning gamers under 17, and Batman fans. So if you're a parent and you have a child under 17 who just loves everything about Batman, you will not want to let them play this game because it is clearly intended for older audiences. The game and story are presented in 5 episodes. In general, the pacing is pretty good. Once Bruce is faced with this new narrative regarding his family and their history and their effect on Gotham, and the Children of Arkham make themselves known, the story really becomes mysterious and intriguing. Being my first Telltale game, I had anecdotally heard from others that Telltale games have problems and issues. They're kind of buggy and janky and are made in a purportedly outdated engine. And having played through this entire game, during my playthrough, issues were definitely evident. In the first 1 to 2 episodes, I thought that the issues were relatively minor, but as they persisted right until the very end of the game, it just became more obnoxious. And as you kind of step back, it's like, I think in most cases, some of these issues probably could have been avoided, and that's a shame in that regard. For example, choppy editing makes for awkward scenes and transitions. After issuing a response, the reactions or follow-ups can be rough. Fortunately, this does not occur in every conversation, but it was prevalent enough that it definitely should be mentioned. More editing and refinement should have been used to help correct these problems. There were a few instances when it seemed as though the choices I made were not registering with other characters, or at least not in the way that I had hoped that they would. In reality, this is likely that I didn't realize the degree of the reactions, but it was still odd, especially in a game that kind of prides itself on you making choices and kind of steering the direction and tone of the game. So, for one example, I did not opt for the most violent response or choice as Batman, but shortly thereafter, I was chided for using over-the-top violence, and I don't know if you could make the argument that, well, the characters didn't know that you had an option that was more violent, and that was the option you chose was still, shocking enough to them. It's like, well, okay, maybe, but from the player's perspective, I had a much stronger choice that I did not choose, and I felt that the characters were treating me as though I had, in fact, chosen that. Additionally, the in-game media, the Gotham media, actually even insinuated in another example that I was a crony of a well-known criminal. And this was particularly perplexing because the journalist who was giving the news brief, he had this picture-in-picture little news video running next to him. And in the video, it showed this criminal reaching out his hand to shake Bruce Wayne's hand, and Bruce is pretty much just standing there giving him the cold shoulder like, yeah, that's not going to happen. This is called a chilly response. But the news is like, it seems like Batman, or it seems like Bruce Wayne is, teaming up with criminals. And it's like, are you not watching the video that's running as you're saying this? Because it's clear that that is not the case here. These cases were confounding, rather irksome, and hampered the pace. Tonally, Batman, the Telltale series, revolves around revenge, perception versus reality, corruption, and the effects of public opinion, whether that is good or bad. Being a Batman story, it should be no surprise that part of the story revolves around crime and corruption. That's really part and parcel of the character itself. However, the story is perhaps at its strongest when it explores the depths of the corruption and how one's perception of others or a legacy of others can be challenged when faced with a new point of view or a new set of facts or reality. Overall, those elements were well done. Although Batman's stories can definitely be dark, images of grisly close-up violence and other disturbing material came off as vulgar and unnecessary. The gameplay is heavily narrative-based, as previously mentioned. Choices, often accompanied by a time limit, are given that make players react with little time to fully analyze the situation, choices, and their impact. This ties into the pacing in that it makes conversations flow quite naturally, unless they are interrupted by uneven editing or dropped audio. The amount of freedom and agency provided here, however, is notable. Players can decide to be passive, benevolent, neutral, or pragmatic. The gameplay and story strikes a balance as it forces players to consider situations from both Batman's and Bruce Wayne's perspectives. Given that player choice will shape not only relationships, but possibly directly impact others, it really feels as though every decision is important and has weight attached to it. Though this framework does afford agency, the game still very much aligns to Telltale's story. So you can't make choices and then just completely change the entire story. There still are parameters and structures here that will result in changes that go with the flow that Telltale wants. So, in some instances, regardless of what you choose, certain things are definitely going to happen. And people often talk about crafting their own experience with Telltale games, and this is true, but only to an extent, like I just explained. because players may have this mentality that you can really just create your own story here. The more linear parts of the game may feel shoehorned and forced. But first-time gamers are definitely going to want to temper your expectations in that regard and just know that you can change certain aspects of it or certain relationships with characters, but it is still very much Telltale's story that they are telling. Combat is presented as QuickTime events or button prompts. It is executed well and is entertaining to have the ability to seamlessly chain combos together without button mashing. It would have been nice, however, to have a controller option to adjust the analog stick sensitivity, as some combat sequences require a cursor to be placed in a specific area, and doing this just felt way more unruly than it should have been. Additionally, it would have been nice to have the option to restart an episode from certain save points, or the save points that you have reached up to that given point. If you make a wrong choice and you want to go back and correct it, it seems as though the only ways that this could be done is to quit before another save point is engaged. So to pretty much just quit and force the game back to your last save. Or if you miss that opportunity, it requires the chapter to be finished and then immediately restarted. So this is not the most intuitive way, in my opinion, that this could have been done, and it's actually pretty cumbersome as the episodes are quite long and typically last over an hour. So it would have been nice, for example, if you could just pop up, into the menu and it shows you all the save points that you have engaged thus far, and then you choose which one you want to start from, and then go back and start from there. Batman the Telltale Series uses the Telltale animation art style. The visuals complement this particular game because Batman originally started as a comic book property. Overall, the comic book cartoon style looks great. Sadly, it is uneven and not consistent. Fire and smoke effects are more photorealistic and just really look out of place here, as they do not match the rest of the game's art style. So imagine having this nice cartoon, hand-drawn type of art style, and then all of a sudden you have smoke that looks like smoke and flames that looks like it's from Unreal 4. It's like, why didn't you just draw that in there to match the rest of the visual aesthetic here? That would have been nice. In some scenes, the characters and environments look layered and defined, giving an impressive amount of depth to those compositions. Yet in others, the art appears to be flat and incomplete. And in one flashback sequence specifically, the textures did not display properly, as large portions of the screen were filled by flickering black shapes. So that's never a good sign in a video game. Similarly, some of the sound design and audio matched the irregular visuals, which is always unfortunate. Audio was dropped in several scenes and transitions. When this was coupled with the flat visuals or rough editing, it made the game feel and look incomplete and unpolished. It is unclear if the audio in a particular flashback with Harvey Dent was intentionally echoing, perhaps for expositional effect, but when the audio echoed for the majority of the game's coda or conclusion, leads me to think that wasn't a stylistic decision, but that was a bug. Another minor critique is that several characters were inaudible when wearing masks and using voice changers, which is especially a shame given the fact that masks and voice modulators or changers are relatively common superhero tools. So there's a disconnect in that regard. By and large, the voice and audio effects sound good, but when there are numerous hitches, they become ever noticeable. Musically, this game is remarkable. Jared Emerson Johnson's orchestral compositions nicely capture the gritty, dire, and heroic atmosphere. The music's consistent high quality enhances the experience and is a highlight. In the end, Batman the Telltale Series is a good, entertaining game. Having played it over the course of a weekend, it was nice to have little interruption between episodes. As such, the overall pacing and story is well executed. There are some, however, who do prefer the original drawn-out release schedule of the Telltale games where you have weeks between the episodes, but I actually preferred having it in a condensed time frame and where you can really just experience it all at essentially, 1 or 2 or 3 sittings. As mentioned above, gamers should know that this is an Elseworld-styled adventure. I thought the game had a good conclusion despite the lurid and irregular nature of violence, some of the story beats, and the gameplay. Nevertheless, I am curious to see what Telltale has in store for the future of Batman and Bruce Wayne. So if you're an age-appropriate gamer and a Batman fan who is open to an Elseworlds or an alternate styled one-shot type of story, then you will likely appreciate what this game has to offer. So that's my review. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below and on our social media. As always, there is a full detailed written review at popculturecrossing.com. If you are watching this or listening to this, I definitely appreciate it if you would consider subscribing or following or giving us a review, as that would definitely help us out there with discoverability. In the meantime, why don't you let me know what your favorite Batman video game is? Additionally, I want to hear what your favorite Batman story is, whether it's from the comics, TV, movies, other video games, whatever. Let me know those 2 things, and I look forward to reading what you have to say. As always, I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.